Hello and welcome to Happy Horror Time. My name is Tim Murdoch.
And my name is Matt Emmert. Now, you may remember today's first special guest as we interviewed him 2.5 years ago about his vampire horror comedy, Red Snow, which we absolutely loved. Well, he's back with a new found footage horror flick, and he's brought his two co-writers, who also happen to be the stars of the film, with him. And let me just say, if you're into madness, mayhem, and mummification, I mean, who isn't, right? You should check out their new film, The Ceremony is About to Begin, which is currently available to rent or buy on Amazon Prime Video or to stream on Tubi and several other digital platforms. Please welcome to the podcast the film's director and co-writer, Nichols Lynch, along with co-writer and star John Laird and co-writer and star Chad Westbrook Hinds.
Hey, guys.
Hi, everyone. That was a mouthful. I hope I got everything right.
Yeah, that's a lot. Good job.
Thank you. So first off, congrats to all three of you on the release of the film. I'm just wondering, Sean, did you give John and Chad a heads up as to what to expect on the show?
I told them to check out other episodes.
We're prepared.
They did. Yeah.
Awesome. So
I think they're converts. Yeah.
I was thinking we offer madness and mayhem on our show. The only thing we're missing is mummification.
Oh, you guys could get into that, really.
So, look, since we learned all about Sean's background in episode 124, if you're listening and want to go back and hear about Red Snow and hear our first interview with Sean, it was episode 124. But let's start this time with John. Where are you from originally, and were you always interested in film, or how'd you get started down that path?
Great question, and I'm delighted to say, actually all three of us, spoiler alert, are from the same small town in California, Visalia, California. Sean and I actually met in kindergarten and go all the way back then, and honestly, I've been making movies since then together. Sean's obviously the lead filmmaker in this relationship, but at the same time, our first film we made together, I think we were 6, was Attack of the Flesh-Eating Beetles. And there was 4 of them. It's a 4-parter. But then ever since then, we've sort of have found opportunities to do projects together. So, again, Sean is, of the 3 of us, the filmmaker of the group for sure. But we're always happy to support him.
That's awesome.
And same question for you, Chad. Where are you from, and how did you first get involved with this industry?
As John just said, we all grew up in Visalia in the Central Valley in California. And I got to know both of them pretty early in high school, I think around freshman, sophomore year. I've always been very obsessed with films, and particularly horror films. So that was definitely something that we all clicked on early. And it's mainly been like a fun side project, getting to help out and be involved with this through Sean. My day job is making wine, but it's been very satisfying to kind of relive those moments back in like high school when we would make weird little movies. And back then he was making a lot of like comedy shorts that he would put into contests and stuff like that. So it's been kind of like a fun thing to revisit now that we're all grown up, as it were. So yeah.
I think that's so awesome. And I feel like maybe it's like a horror fans thing, but like Tim and I made dumb little movies when we were kids. You know? Yeah, he made a movie. I used to make parodies of horror movies. I made Yell, which was a parody of Scream. I Know What You Did. I Know What You Did Last Week, which was a parody of I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I did one called Are You Afraid of the Park, which was making fun of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like these are the worst quality things. This isn't like a Nichols Lynch like production. These are like, yeah.
You say that you haven't seen Attack of the Flesh-Eating Beetles.
I want
to.
It's funny. We didn't know that you guys had met so young. So I was going to ask, because when we were looking through IMDb, we saw, Sean, that this film wasn't the first time you worked with Chad, that he had a role in your 2015 film, Prep School, and your 2019 horror short, Audiobook of the Dead. So I was going to ask, like, how you first started working together, but obviously you'd been working together for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that I remember Phil and I were, John and I were living.
We should just tell our listeners, just because Phil, so is John your middle name, but you sometimes go by it, or?
That's exactly right. I've tried to create my film persona, and these two are just blowing it. No, but yes, you may hear me called Phil, John. You can call me whatever you want.
Phil, John,
yes.
Keith. We'll call you.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but John and I were living in San Francisco for around college, and we'd frequently have Chad over, and he'd crash on the couch, and just at the time, there were a lot of different movies being made, and I feel like Chad would often get like sucked into the orbit. Like I remember in Audiobook of the Dead specifically, I guess I was living in Berkeley at that time, but it just kind of like Chad and his wife Michelle happened to be there, and we were filming a scene with like a monster in the back seat of the car. So it's like, oh, let's get Chad to play the monster. So he'd like put on the costume, and it's like just a side effect of us all just being in the same orbit all the time.
Hey, that's an IMDb credit.
Yeah. And we asked Sean this last time, but we wanted to hear from John and Chad. Growing up, what horror films had a major impact on you?
I'll kick us off, or
Sure.
do you want to go?
Go for it.
I'll start, and I'll just say, so when I was really young, like 3 years old, I had a babysitter who thought it'd be a good idea to show me Child's Play. Turns out that's like a little young to show a kid Child's Play, and we've only figured this out over my time because apparently my folks came home and I started talking about the scary doll a lot. And anyways, as a result of this experience, I actually was like terrified of horror films. Like I would stay away from them for most of my youth. And then at 12 years old, Sean decided it's time to bring Phil or John back into the fold. This will be like the joke.
You
the
messed up
joke.
your own name.
My
That's
own name,
great.
James.
Yes. Oh, God.
Yeah. Bring John back into the fold. And so it was Army of Darkness is actually what he used to like be like, see, horror is both like fun and all these different things at once. And that was like the perfect way to get me back into horror. And ever since then, been super into it. But, hands down, Army of Darkness is what sort of pulled me into both the just the joy of horror, actually, because it is at its core kind of as dark as it can be. It's also kind of got this like humor to it all.
Awesome. How about you, Chad?
Yeah, I'd say kind of similar to what John said there. I think I was a kid who was actually like scared of horror, but I had sort of like a masochistic desire to keep going back, even though it freaked me out. So like, I loved Are You Afraid of the Dark, even though it terrified me. Like the clown episodes, like they scared me shitless, but I would still watch every single episode. You know what I mean? But probably my favorite like early horror memory was, I think I was 7 when Scream came out. And before I even saw the movie, I had my older cousin babysitting me. And I asked her to tell me like a scary story. And she told me the plot of Scream because she had just seen it in the theaters. And I didn't know she was telling me the plot of a movie. I thought she was making the story up. And it was very like detailed, like to the point where they're like, she's describing the party where everybody's dressed like the killer. And like, I just remember thinking it was the best ghost story I'd ever heard in my whole life. And I don't think it was for like a couple years till I finally saw it. It was like, holy shit, this is the story. She just told me the plot of this movie.
They should really make a movie about that story.
Exactly.
I mean,
and I love Scream to this day.
Scream's been around now next year 30 years.
Wow,
crazy.
that's great.
That's crazy.
And Sean, since you answered that question in your first episode and said Creep Show had a major impact on you at a young age, instead I'm going to ask you, what horror films that have come out over the last, let's say, 5 years have impressed you the most?
Oh man, you're really throwing me a curveball here. I don't know. It's hard to say because I see a lot of horror. Like just this last year, Oddity was a big one that I was like, wow, that's a very original idea. Like especially in the subgenre of creepy dolls. I had never seen that kind of creepy doll. Gosh, that's hard. That's the one that pops out at me right away is one that I really loved. And it was like just one of those Shudder finds that I just wanted to tell everybody about after seeing. But
No, that's a good
it's hard to
pick.
say because it's such a like great time for horror and just like all different budget levels. I feel like.
Yeah, no, you're
true.
and Oddity was one of our favorites of last year.
That's
If not,
so eerie. Like I left Matt's house and I got in like my car and I looked in the back seat.
and you were like, "Where's that dog?" No, it really. We watch horror so often that it's rare that a movie like still gives me goosebumps, and that one did. That doll like sitting in different places and the performance and yeah, it was great.
Was it a doll or was it like a big mannequin? I don't know what that was.
Yeah, mannequin doll. Yeah, the whole opening of that movie, it's exactly right, Matt, where I was like, I'm so desensitized to horror that I think that and Hereditary, which Chad and I saw in the theater together, it's like when you see one that actually rattles you, it's like, whoa, it's like I'm getting a fix again. That I've just been chasing the dragon this whole time.
Yeah.
And I finally found something that like really rattled me. So that's always exciting to see. And I think Oddity and Hereditary are two fairly, well, who knows how old Hereditary is now, but those are two recent ones that really got to me.
No, those are good picks. So moving on to the ceremony is about to begin. Now, just to give listeners our usual spoiler warning, we will be discussing plot points with the filmmaker. So if you don't want anything spoiled, I'd suggest pausing this interview, going to watch it, Prime Video, Tubi, wherever, and then coming back and you can hear us discuss everything. So you've been warned.
But don't watch it on your phone.
Yeah, that's true. So let's start with Chad. Where did the idea for this film come from? Like, had you guys always had an interest in cults or ancient Egyptian culture, or what inspired kind of working both of those aspects into the story?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure the exact impetus, but I know that it was we do this thing where like usually annually we kind of go have like a little getaway with the three of us, and we kind of go hang out. It's like a little mini vacation or kind of like a bachelor party, even though we're no longer getting married to new people. We just kind of like make up an excuse to go somewhere and hang out. And the idea of doing like a found footage type movie within that period of time was kind of the original thought. And I think honestly, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I don't remember exactly how it all went out. I just remember we had an email thread back and forth for a while where like Sean would be like, I had this idea, it'd be like this, and I'd be like, oh, that reminds me of like these three movies, we should watch them. And I'd be like, oh, I think if I were the leader, I would be kind of like inspired by these things. And I had a person I worked with in my life that very much inspired Anubis. And so I kind of had fun riffing on that with Sean and John early on in the process. But I don't know, John or Sean, do you actually remember like the real impetus more than me?
I just want to say really quick, the bachelor party thing got my mind, because you have to realize like we actually shot a lot of this before Red Snow. Like a lot of this was pre-pandemic, like 2019, I want to say. And a lot of it was finding this location where a lot of the movie is shot. You know, the thing that I get asked about a lot is like, did you build all these sets? Like, what was your budget for this movie? And there's a place in Northern California where I was actually attending an actual like bachelor party. It was not a crazy bachelor party, but it was like at this place, there's just like these ancient Egyptian buildings everywhere. And the whole time I was thinking is like, what kind of fucked up horror movie could you set at this place? And I was like, at that moment, I was like, I really need to tell John and Chad about this place because it would definitely involve mummies, but like a modern mummy, because it's clearly like built recently, or at least like in the 80s. It's like, and so, yeah, it's really just this email thread. And John, you can chime in on this. I looked back at it recently to kind of remember, and it was very much like figuring out that it was a cult, figuring out the impetus of like why someone would visit. All of these things sort of came together in the weeks heading up to us doing this, what ended up being like maybe 45 minutes of the movie that we just kind of shot over this period where we were staying there. And then just kind of like figuring it out from there. Like it was kind of refreshing because it's the opposite of how I normally work, where there's like a fully fleshed out screenplay and storyboards for every shot and like months of rehearsal and pre-production. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know, what was that sort of your memory of it, John?
Yeah, no, it is. And that's what I was going to say. If anything, too, I mean, it's not that we came in totally cold. We did have sort of this concept and sort of the art in mind for how it would go. But it also was just, again, since we're spending a weekend together, we just sort of like just saturated the time with filming constantly and just trying out different things. And because I'm sure that there's plenty of things I can't remember anymore, Sean, that like didn't make it in the film that were just sort of like fun scenes we shot just to see like how it would go. But I have to imagine though, like any found footage film, there's probably like 30 times as much footage as appears in the real film. But yeah, that's all right.
I just didn't know, Sean, that you shot this before Red Snow, because kind of fucks up all of our questions. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you, but like what it specifically is what it's like writing a film with two others, because, Red Snow, you wrote on your own, and a lot of like your shorts you wrote on your own. So how it's different, but it looks like you went from writing with two people to then writing on your own. But anyway, what is the process? Because I'm just trying to think, like, do you all write certain parts? Do you share certain responsibilities? How do you write with two other people?
And do you all have backgrounds of being in cults?
Oh man, I'm gonna take the fifth on the last one, but yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear Chad and John's perspective on this, but really, it was interesting because I view it as like we all collaborated on the story and the beats of things, and they had a lot of freedom with their characters. Like, I, as a writer, can claim no ownership over Anubis. Like, that is fully a Chad creation. So much so that I remember on the drive there, I kind of had my preconceived notion of like what that character would be. And Chad had just kind of like, just by the way, this is what the character is going to be like. I was like, whoa, that's like way different than I imagined. But it ended up being so rich. And I just remember Chad like feverishly scribbling like some of his monologues onto index cards, and it was like very much that kind of vibe. And even though we did shoot most of it before Red Snow, we did go back after and like we shot. I mean, the reason that this took so long to come out is like we would shoot new footage, and like we shot. We kind of reshot the ending at one point because we weren't satisfied with that after like a test screening we had, and. But yeah, there was. I'd say that I'd say that we all kind of collaborated on the broad strokes, and then the fine character stuff like was them. Like Keith is John's creation, and Anubis is Chad's.
Oh, that's cool. And that makes sense, especially to craft the character you're going to be playing. Another quick question for you, Sean, from the directing standpoint. In what ways is it easier or more challenging doing found footage versus a traditional film like Red Snow?
Gosh, it's funny because I went in thinking it would be a lot easier, but in a lot of ways it's harder. Just like keeping track of the continuity is a lot harder because you haven't really storyboarded. I mean, it's exciting because there's all this room for invention, just like in the moment, and there is on features, but are on traditional features. But like when you're like really pressed to get like your days done and like you have your shot list, like that can kind of like suck up a lot of your creative juices, just like that technical aspect. So I don't know. I'd say it's not necessarily easier or harder. It's just like a totally different way of making a movie. And, and just knowing that you're going to be shooting a lot of material that you're not going to necessarily use. Like that's also it's really like a project that's built in the editing room, even more so than, something like Red Snow was, for sure.
And, Chad, you mentioned Anubis, and just for listeners, Anubis is kind of this mysterious leader of the Osiris Collective that takes over. I'm wondering what drew you specifically to wanting to play this role, especially in addition to writing the film with them.
Well, I think the reason I wanted to play the role, kind of piggybacking on what Sean was saying in like our writing style or our collaboration style, like we have a strong advantage because we're just friends. And when we're not making a movie, we kind of are making a movie in our conversations. Like we just are making jokes, we're riffing, we're playing around, we start talking about the people at the other side of the bar and making up a story about what they're doing. And that becomes like a joke for a long time, my daughter sneaking in the background.
Oh no! Oh, I can see an arm. I just see an arm.
So that is to say that. Sorry, that got distracting. What was I responding to? Oh,
making fun of people at the bar.
Why did I play Anubis? And so I'd say, as opposed to just being like, I want to play this role, it occurred to me that our kind of natural improvisational style around each other is something that I would be able to tap into very quickly while we were shooting. And if we were hiring an actor to do it, they wouldn't be able to, even if they're a better actor than I am, just because I would just be like in flow, you know what I mean? And then also, as opposed to maybe if we were just kind of scripting a crazy cult leader, I think my goal was to make it really idiosyncratic. And again, in a way that would probably be harder to communicate to somebody we would be bringing in without spending a lot more than our budget had on acting. So yeah, I had very clear people in mind that I knew in real life and just that I'm aware of that I thought I could capture playing Anubis. At that time, it was kind of more obscure, but now we're kind of living in like Elon Musk's America, and you kind of like have this weird, creepy, toxic, psychedelic, masculine thing going on. So in some ways, I feel like this movie is really appropriate for the world we're living in right now.
I was just about to ask you, was there anyone or past famous cult leader that you like studied?
Not really. There's this guy, because when I still lived in the Bay Area, I wasn't a full-time winemaker yet. I did wine sales to kind of pay for that our project to grow. And I had this guy I sold wine to who I wouldn't quite say he was a cult leader, but he did have this like weird health wine brand. And he definitely considered himself what he would call a thought leader. He would say that often, like, I'm a thought leader. And he would like record himself giving speeches. And he definitely, his clientele were like weird, rich people that wanted to try to not die ever, you know, like they would there's the kind of people that are into like extending life, and they'd probably be freezing their heads if it would mean they could be brought back to life. Just like insane shit.
So you have a sequel.
So yeah, there's your sequel.
Well, actually we have some thoughts, but anyways, and the things he would just say were just batshit crazy, but he was such a good account for me that I would like see him fairly often. And as opposed to other like restaurants or wine bars, you kind of cruise in and pour some wine. He insisted that I would come to his house and he would make me food. And it really was like, you could imagine it becoming a horror movie very quickly. And the things he would say were just really, really crazy and weird and creepy. So it was not hard for me to just kind of be like, okay, I'm him, but I'm into Egypt and mummies. And then everything else is kind of the same. So I was able to just kind of riff and just pick up his weird vibes. And yeah, I don't know.
No, that is a good inspiration.
I mean, watching it for me, I felt like I've met this person before, living in Hollywood or West Hollywood. Like, there's very manipulative, like, agents and managers. I was just kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, and a lot of those weird, like, health-related things can get really cultish because it's like you have to follow this. I mean, I don't want to get too deep, but, like, even some crazy diets, like, people get very cultish about it and very judgmental. Switching gears, John, you played Keith, the one who's making the documentary and looking into the Osiris Collective because his ex-girlfriend Maddie has disappeared. What attracted you to playing this role?
Good question. I mean, a few things. As we were coming up with it, we knew there sort of had to be the straight man, right? So somebody to kind of counterbalance the intensity of Anubis and kind of give somebody else for the watchers to anchor to. But otherwise, I joke, it was pretty easy. I just had to tap into my inner dope to, like, you know, at the end of the day, I'll just say, like, I don't like Keith. Keith sucks. Like, Keith kind of has what's coming to him a little bit. So
it's funny you say that because my next question was, do you think that you as John would ever be willing to go alone to investigate a cult like that? Because that was, and don't worry, I'm definitely not knocking that decision because in a horror movie, people have to make dumb decisions. But as you, would you ever go alone to investigate something shady like that?
Let's see. Probably not. Like, probably I'd have a good enough, like, spidey sense now. But that's my point is, the inner dope in me like feels like I was tapping into like my like chasing love in early college that was like doomed, and like that version of me probably would have done some dumb stuff just because like I was looking to get with an ex or something, right? So anyways, yeah, I think I would know better these days, but yeah.
I found Keith incredibly relatable because when you have that obsession, like, where is this person? You do anything to find out. So I
could definitely see Tim.
I would join the cult.
Just put a cute guy out there. Tim would be running into the cult, lads, and get it. Yeah. So John and Chad aren't the only ones with a role in the film. We noticed, Sean, that you also play one of the Osiris Collective members being interviewed in the documentary. Now, last time we had you on, because we noticed that you had some acting credits on some of your films, you had mentioned that you did have an acting background, but you were kind of gravitating more toward the writing, directing side of the filmmaking. But was this kind of an easy role to take on that didn't take your focus too much away from directing?
Yeah, the whole movie sort of starts with these interview segments, as you know, like the sort of mockumentary aspect of it. And basically how I ended up being one of those talking heads, that wasn't like the original plan. I was very much like, no, I'm not going to act in this. I'm just going to direct. But basically, we did these sessions with improv actors, mostly in San Francisco, and I would give them like a blurb, like kind of like, these are the questions I'm going to ask you about. This is the vibe of the cult that you just left. And then we just shoot hours and hours of, and that's some of my favorite material in the movie is just these interviews we did, because a lot of them came up with really funny stuff. And but what was funny is when we went back to reshoot the ending, basically all the stuff you see in that tomb, the stuff with like the canopic jar, the sarcophagus, those are all like reshoots I did in LA later. At that point in the shoot, I was like, oh, now there's all these holes in the story. So it's like, I'm almost like this exposition machine that's like, I ended up having to be in there to be like, yeah, we hollowed out a barn and put a crypt in there because, of course, in the original ending, he goes into a barn and it's just a barn. Whereas, maybe this is showing a little too much behind the curtain, but there's like a whip pan in that barn scene where there's a hidden edit in that whip where we're suddenly in the new footage that we did in this like much richer set with all of this Egyptian stuff to kind of keep it more on theme. But yeah, I was really honestly just in there because at that point it's like I know this isn't really going to be a scattershot interview. I know exactly the points I need to hit. Like I need to talk about this barn that was so important that was actually just a barn on the outside. So that's just kind of how it goes with this sort of indie filmmaking, is you have to kind of do some stitches, and sometimes you have to put yourself in there to do it.
And we didn't even notice. I mean, obviously, yeah,
cohesive.
Yeah, exactly. It all came together. You guys had spoken about, I think, Chad, you mentioned that because we were going to ask where the commune was or where it was filmed, and you said Northern California, which it says in the film it's Northern California. But I've got to say, like, it looked really culty, like however you guys put it. Like, and again, you're saying it's how much of it was you guys adding stuff to it versus what existed as it was?
The set specifically?
Yeah, the set. I take it the reshoot and the ending in LA, you put that all together because that was in LA. But how much of just the whole setting of the commune was like you guys set decorating versus what actually just existed there?
I mean, I'd say 98% was just there. And that's why the movie got made, as Sean was saying. Like, it was just asking to be turned into a movie. And it was the space you could rent. So it's like, it was just too easy to do, and then I'd say everything beyond that was like, like Anubis's costume, which is like from Amazon, like some face paint and some like necklaces. I don't think, am I missing something, Sean? I mean, the end is different. The reshoot was a different situation, but the rest of it it's just a crazy place that I would say you could definitely say at one time was at least cult related, and now it's just open to the public.
Yeah,
I want to visit that.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I would. Yeah, I was trying to think about this because really, it was the sort of thing where with low budget horror filmmaking, I mean, and I'm probably repeating something I said with Red Snow, because that was another movie where I kind of reverse engineered everything from a pre-existing location. Like, if we had just made this story up without a location and we're on the hook to build all these insane structures, like it would be like $1 million movie. And so because we already had all this built-in production value, we were kind of able to write to the location. And because, we met some of the people on the grounds, and it's kind of like, oh, this is not that far removed from Anubis. I mean, like a non-homicidal, well, I don't know, I can't say that for sure, but like a version of what we're already doing. So it's just kind of like, this is perfect. Like, even if we could build something, it would not be this authentic and specific. Like a Northern California ancient Egyptian cult is like a specific thing that we're, absolutely sort of tapping into.
I think, Sean, your next film should be a slasher called Bachelor Party with a bunch of guys going into the wilderness and one of them's killing it. Like, how often you never get it to where it's only guys?
No. That's rare.
Anyway. So John, when Keith arrives at the commune, and we've touched on this a little bit, but no one is around except for creepy Anubis, and Keith can pretty much tell that something is off. But he decides not just to stay, but to stay tonight alone. So, in your opinion, what's Keith thinking? Like, is he just that dedicated to finding his ex? Is that what is keeping him there?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I also, we kind of learn that his life has sort of fallen apart. He had this marriage that now is over. And so in a way, I actually think it's sort of like this is maybe the most exciting thing to happen to Keith in a long, long time. And so there is both that, like, yes, he's unsure, but also like, what's he going to leave to? Like, go back home, like be lonely at home and drink too much more. Like, I think there's an element of, yes, he's lovesick. He's looking for kind of somebody he used to know, but he's also, he's also just, again, kind of this dopey, bored guy who, like, this is sort of enthralling. And that's sort of intentional too, because again, especially at the beginning of the film, kind of you get the sense of how people fall in with a cult, right? And it's sort of people like this that are sort of susceptible to sort of a more interesting person and kind of getting coaxed into their world and just accepting it. So I think all of that's going on for Keith.
Yeah. And John, this will be the most important question you answer during this interview. Did Keith really end up getting in that jacuzzi naked?
That's a real question.
That's a great question. I don't think we did. I'm not saying we haven't done that before, but for this one, I don't think we did. Did we, Chad? I don't think so.
Oh, I'm asking the character, but I mean, you can tell. We were thinking, I don't know if you could.
Because he says, hey, I don't have a suit. And he goes, that's okay. And
yes.
Cut two, you're both in the jacuzzi. So.
Yeah. So do you think Keith got in there naked? It's very important. We need to know.
Yeah. Oh, no. For sure he did. For sure.
Keith and Anubis, the characters are naked. I can't remember if the actors are.
I love that you answered that from like the actor. Well, were we naked? We wanted to know if the characters. Yeah.
You guys can ship Anubis and Keith, I'd say.
I think we should. Yeah.
Okay, that's where Keith and I differ. I don't think I'd hop in a jacuzzi. Well, maybe.
Yeah, actually, you probably would. But and then I have to ask, since we have all three writers on, who was the genius who came up with the name of the porn site JizzTube?
I think I improv that.
Yeah, that was Chad. That was definitely Chad.
That reeks of Chad.
Got it. Love it.
I remember on the way there to the actual place, they were in one car and I was in another car, and it was about an hour drive. And I was just practicing the monologue over and over again, trying to like figure out my story on the drive. And that was kind of where it was going, was being like an ex kind of like porn tech bro.
It goes from porn tech to ancient Egyptian cults.
Yeah, classic.
Totally get it. So, Sean, the last 20 minutes of this film, which now hearing this, it sounds like it's mostly what was reshot, are really intense and creepy because, spoiler alert, we find out that Anubis has been experimenting on various commune members by turning them into brain dead mummies, or what he calls, transcending to another level. And after poor Keith discovers and tries to get away, he gets captured by Anubis and turned into one himself. But I did have a few questions I was hoping about the ending that I hope you could clarify. So first off, and this is just a little technical thing, was Anubis simply piercing their brains by putting the needles up through their noses, or was he actually removing parts of their brains? Because we noticed there's a part when Keith discovers a container that has an actual brain in it, but then there's the pictures with the piercing, and obviously it happens to him. So was he piercing them, or was he removing brains also?
Yeah, I thought that was coming through the nose.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was kind of different for each test subject. I mean, I think that, we had just had a lot of discussions about this, and we sort of thought what Anubis was really trying to do was to find a new vessel for Father Osiris, because I feel like we didn't want to over-explain that too much, but basically, he thought that through this ceremony, because, one of the big reveals at the end is that Father Osiris is still there. He's just sort of comatose and fucked up from whatever happened on Mount Shasta. But definitely those are brains that are in that canopic jar. I think that he'd refined it to a point when it gets to Keith's turn, that he's just getting in there and kind of scrambling them a little bit. But I don't know. What was your guys' take on that, Chad?
Well, I think part of the benefit of that character is that we don't think he's some sort of mad genius or anything. We think he's a weirdo who is just making shit up all the time. So I think our take was that he's basically just like trying again and again to figure out how to mummify something without understanding how it works. So I think he is probably in some instances just like lobotomizing people, hoping it'll do something. And in other instances, maybe is pulling out a brain. There's just there's no method to the madness. It's just like unbridled, overconfident insanity.
And that goes right to the design of the mummies, where we had a lot of discussions of like, oh, these shouldn't look too good. Like they need to look kind of fucked up and like amateurish, which was, sort of a calculated risk because people could come out of the movie being like, oh, they really half-assed the mummies. But that was the one thing where we really spent and got like professional like makeup creature effects people in to do the mummies. And it was very much like, don't make ancient Egyptian mummies, make botched surgery, like make like bad plastic surgery. It was kind of we sent a bunch of very disturbing photos back and forth. And that was kind of the whole idea was these are people like that just went through like the worst botched, like, backdoor plastic surgery imaginable. And that was kind of my direction for the mummies too, which did you, Matt and Tim, did you catch some of the people playing the mummies at the end there?
So okay, so you had mentioned before this interview there was some Red Snow cameos, and I didn't. So please tell us who were the Red Snow cameos, because I kept looking for Denise.
Denise is in there.
Oh,
yeah. So because this is a non-SAG production, they are uncredited. So basically the very sort of the hero mummy that Keith first finds, the blonde girl on the table, that's Laura Kennan, who played Jackie, kind of the main vampire, kind of main villain of Red Snow.
Of course.
And then the very first two mummies that come after that are Nico and Denise. So the 3 stars of Red Snow are sneakily in it.
All three,
and it was all 3 of them, and there's a lot of other people playing mummies too, but those are kind of the 3 main ones that you see close up. Besides Maddie, because it was the sort of thing where I knew that they'd be down to do it because we just worked together, and it was just like a day out of their schedule. Like, so it was kind of an under the table thing. But I checked with my SAG folks, and they're like, yeah, just don't credit them. It'll be fine.
Oh, that's good.
So I hope I'm not getting them in trouble outing them this way.
No, I because you had said that, and I guess I didn't even think uncredited because first I went to IMDb and I was like, I don't recognize any of these names. And then we were watching, I'm like, did I miss them?
Well, that's good to know. I always thought that SAG was like, oh, like, but apparently they're just like, just don't credit them. So note to self.
Or change your name. Like we've talked to people who are in movies from years ago and dealing with union stuff and just had a different stage name. I guess it can be like Philip/John if you want.
Hopefully they did a better job than we've been doing on the show.
And also, Sean, you mentioned, and it's funny you used the word vessel. I wrote that down actually, and so wanted you to know that we did get that across because I was going to ask you, were all of these sacrifices / mummifying of the commune members just Anubis's fucked up way of trying to create vessels for Father Osiris's spirit? Was that his ultimate goal? So if that was, I got it.
Yeah, it's funny because we view this as a dark comedy just as much, like a really fucked up dark comedy just as much as a horror film. And it's, to us, there's nothing funnier than thinking about Anubis like just repeatedly fucking up trying to make mummies. There's just something like really darkly funny about that. And even at the end of the movie, you're not entirely sure if he has brought back Father or if this is just going to turn out to be another, he calls them failed experiments.
Yeah.
These failed experiments that should be grateful to be part of this thing. Like he's such a narcissist.
Yeah. No,
until
totally.
the end. And that's kind of why my favorite scene of the movie is the last scene, like Anubis's big monologue to camera, and then leading into the reveal of like what's happened to Keith, because it's kind of just like the mission statement of the movie is like, whenever I work on things that aren't my own projects, like there's always this talk of like, oh, you have to have a character arc, they have to learn something along the way. And what I love about Anubis as a character is he just kind of gets worse. Like he doesn't learn anything through the journey. I forgot what the original question was, but yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's the ending's kind of intentionally sort of up for interpretation, but all that I know for sure is that Anubis has learned nothing.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. Like you said, the word narcissist, like they don't really change. They might change for a little bit, but they go right back to their old ways.
Yeah. No matter what, you can't tell them they've done anything wrong. And Chad, I wanted to get your take on something. Do you think that Father Osiris was doing shady things before Anubis arrived, or do you think things only took a dark turn with the commune when your character arrived?
Good question. I'm trying to remember what we used to think originally when we were plotting that out. I think my take now, and you can correct me, John and Sean, I think my take is that Father Osiris was pretty authentic, but maybe shady in the way all cult leaders are a little shady. Like I'm sure he had way too many sexual partners and probably like was way too into encouraging like rampant drug use, but maybe in like a more like altruistic way. Whereas Anubis clearly is doing this manipulatively. Like he's seeing this as like, these are marks because they're so easy to control through those methods. Whereas I feel like Father Osiris was more like, yeah, like we're doing drugs because like we're going to transcend, and we're all having sex with each other because like love is beautiful,
Yeah.
Like I think he was probably a little bit better, but maybe that's just my take. What do you guys think?
That's like old school.
Old school cult.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I think Anubis was the real poison to that place, and that it was sort of like, I think every cult has that arc too, that like at first it is like going pretty well and everybody's like into it and on the same wavelength, and then Anubis was just the deteriorating factor.
And John, you have a very intense scene with Maddie where you basically are hitting her over the head with a rock. How was that, filming that, like mentally challenging?
Yeah. Again, if I allowed myself to, at least when we were filming, take out the frustrations of past relationships, right? No, it wasn't that, it wasn't that difficult. No, it was, for Keith, I think that's supposed to be sort of like this like apex moment where it's like now like truly everything in his life is unraveled, and this is like this like threshold he never thought he'd cross. But I don't know. I think by the time we were filming that scene, I think it was pretty late at night, and I think I just I just knew what the shot had to be. So getting through it was relatively easy. It was just, but you know, you had to understand that again for him that was supposed to be this like real like total collapse moment.
It's sad in a way because again that was obviously his whole purpose for coming there, and obviously she has been turned into a mummy, and his fate is soon happening too. But it is the most brutal moment because it's like he obviously has to kill the person he cared about, and in a very brutal fashion. So yeah, it was.
Oh, when someone comes out having blue makeup all over their face, kind of messy, and then they won't give me my keys, I thought that was the scariest part.
It's happened to us all.
You know, whenever someone just comes out of there with that blue,
I was like, wait, that is some messy makeup. This guy's off.
So, Sean, where and when did the film have its premiere? Like, was it at a film festival? And what was it like seeing for the first time on a big screen with an audience?
Yeah, you know, it's technically its premiere was at Panic Fest, which is this great genre festival in Kansas City. That was April of last year. That's also where Red Snow premiered. But the first time that we really got to see it with an audience, because we didn't make the trip to Kansas City, unfortunately, was we saw it in this very like intimate venue in Sacramento, the Dreamland Cinema, which is this really cool underground theater. It was for the Sacramento Midnight Film Festival. And we had two different showings. And I remember, I just remember like, the vibe was totally different at each of the two screenings. And I felt like the first time it felt like the crowd is really into it, but they were very much like treating it like a serious horror movie. And I was kind of thinking like, yeah, that's a part where I'd laugh, you know, like especially during like the interview stuff. To me, I think like so much of that is so funny. But it could just be because I know the people in it. Like, I don't see how you can see the moment where one of the interview subjects is like, I think Egyptian culture is for everybody. You know, he just happens to be white. Like how you could not think that that's funny, but some people were just like, yeah, appropriation. You know, it just as if we were trying to make some serious point there. But yeah, it was really exciting, you know, because it was kind of the perfect crowd to see the movie with. And I think that because we'd lived with the movie for so long, like, you know, 5 years of post basically, and reshooting things and shuffling things around, like we knew it so well. So like people who may not have had any inkling that mummies were part of the movie. I mean, I think one of the downsides of releasing the movie to a wide audience is we have to really lead with the mummies in our marketing. I mean, just like look at our poster and stuff. It's like, people really know it's coming. Whereas when it first came out, there was like no information about the movie out. And like, I guess people might have guessed that's where it was going. But when that kind of, that third act twist happens, like people were really responding to it in both of the screenings. So that was really exciting.
That's cool. And so then what was the reason for the delay in post, or why you pushed off doing it? Is it because you wanted to get around to reshooting the ending and wanted to wait till you were able to, or was it the pandemic, or
all the above?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it was a lot of, I mean, the biggest thing was that I shot an entirely different movie, you know, like so much of from like 2020 when I shot Red Snow through to 2021, 2022, when like the rollout of it was happening, that was kind of sucking up a lot of my attention. But I remember that we had a test screening of a really early version, like before I even shot Red Snow in San Francisco. And we kind of saw where a lot of the problems were, like mostly in the third act. And so we kind of always knew we needed to reshoot some pieces. So we kind of didn't, I mean, I don't know, it was just the sort of thing where we knew we'd get around to it, but because we were just making it ourselves and because there weren't like angry investors demanding to know where the movie was, we kind of had that liberty to really take our time and think about it. So I think that kind of worked to our advantage, kind of the long gestation period.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we want to play a quick little game with the three of you where we are just going to give you the names of either 2 found footage horror films or 2 cult related horror films. And you just have to tell us which one you like better. That's it. If you haven't seen any of them, totally fine.
You
but
can just lie.
Yeah, you can just lie. Yeah. But just to keep things orderly, since there's 3 people, let's have Sean answer first, followed by John, and then Chad. Cool? So we're just going to give you the names of these 2, since, you just made a found footage / cult-inspired horror film, just to get your take on some of these films. Okay. Either The Wicker Man, the original 1973 one, or Midsummer.
That's easy for me, Wicker Man. I like Midsummer a lot, but I would go Wicker Man.
John?
Wicker Man also. Same boat as Sean.
Yeah, I think the visual aspects of Midsummer are kind of like hard to top, but Wicker Man, as the content's concerned, is actually more spooky. Like Wicker Man's a scarier movie than Midsummer. Midsummer's just kind of gross at points,
Tim, you love Midsummer.
I love Midsummer too. I love Midsummer.
Watch it on a loop. I've seen it
He
once.
does every night.
Every night.
Every night.
And we're talking about the Nick Cage version, right?
No. Oh, you're talking about his. No, that doesn't count.
Jokes.
The Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity.
Blair Witch Project. Like, I don't know. I could go off on a whole thing about this, but it's like, that was such a huge cultural touchstone for like not just millennials, but I'm sure Gen X as well. And like, just like I got to see that in the theater, and that was just like such a mind-boggling experience where I feel like that's hard to recapture. And again, like I like Paranormal Activity, but they're just like I had just never seen anything like that before, and to have been there at the time, to where I really like knew kids at school who thought it was real, and I was never quite there, but that was a pretty like nerve-shattering experience.
I was one of those kids who thought it was real. I went in, I was questioning it, but that marketing campaign, especially for the time, was genius. Yeah. Okay, John?
Yeah, again, you could tell we grew up together. All the same thoughts. I have a lot of respect for Paranormal Activity. I remember it really freaked me out the first time I saw it, but Blair Witch really was that, like, it just felt like the real, like, for me, that's the first found footage film.
And Chad?
Yeah, definitely Blair Witch. I was also somebody who I think I actually thought it was real for at least a few months when it came out. And I like watch that movie fairly often. It holds up for me. I love the New England Witch in the Woods setting. Like, I think The Witch kind of like took that and turned it into like a more, produced film, but the vibes are all there. And like, I'll be honest, I don't like Paranormal Activity at all. I think it's totally overrated.
I was waiting for some drama, but because I was going to shake things up with our next question and mess with the order just to see if I can get you guys disagreeing. So the next one, but I'm still reeling from the Paranormal Activity question.
I don't think it's scary. I don't find that movie scary.
Really? How about Paranormal Activity 2?
I think it's just diminishing returns. I don't know. Maybe I need to give another chance. They never grabbed me.
You know what? Watch it late at night.
And did you see it in the theater? Did you see it in a theater?
I saw the first one at the theater. Okay, yeah, I think I was like kind of open to it when it came out. I think I was in college, and I was like, it's okay. But it just didn't work for me. I don't know.
No, I've heard that from people, some people, Okay, we're going to start with Chad on this one. 2 Ty West films now.
I love Ty West.
The House of the Devil or The Sacrament.
The House of the Devil is in like my top 10 favorite movies. I love that movie. The Sacrament was pretty good. And obviously this movie that we made, you could see some Sacrament vibes there. So it's not like I don't like it, but The House of the Devil to me is like one of the best movies of all time. I love that movie.
Okay. John?
Yeah, it's hard because I really want to disagree at some point. Yeah, I agree. Like House of the Devil, I just rewatched that recently and I'm like, God, this holds up. Like I just love the whole, like, and I think another thing about that movie, just like Blair Witch, is like doing something that hadn't really been done at that time. Like I feel like now we're so steeped in like 80s revival stuff, but that felt like so fresh and new, like being shot on 16 millimeter and like all those performers at that time, like Greta Gerwig being in it is such a crazy detail.
And being shot in the head in the middle of a car. I will never forget my reaction to that scene.
And it was the sort of movie where it's like, I think Chad introduced me to that movie. It was like, it was at that time of like, it was kind of being passed around. Like, have you seen this thing? And it was very exciting at the time and still is.
How about you, John?
Yeah, I'm gonna disappoint you guys because I'm right there with them. House of the Devil, it's just like by far, I don't know. I always have a lot of respect for a movie that's got like the totally batshit third act or final kind of aspects to it, and so I'm always looking for that. They, I'll share quickly, not to derail the films you're talking about, but they were with Chad and Sean had already seen Barbarian, and I hadn't, and I knew nothing about it. And so they sat and watched me as I watched that whole film. And so, anyways, that was another example where I just love when it just completely switches on you or takes like that radical turn. So I have to go with House of the Devil.
No, that makes sense.
And Creep or Hell House LLC?
Who's going first?
Let's start with John this time, if you've seen both of them. Creep, the original Creep, or the original Hell House LLC?
Yeah, I'm just going to predict, guys. We're going to do it again. We're going to be three for three, but I'm going with Creep. It's our film was compared oftentimes in some reviews to Creep, and we see it too, of course. Like, I think that's a big inspiration for us. But just you can't beat Mark Duplass. So,
Sean.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it's funny because, I'm choosing Creep. And Creep 2, I like even more, I'll say. But, it was the sort of thing where I remember John saying to me at one point when reviews I don't think even the first review had come out. We were all really excited because this is the first time like the general public was going to see it. And John was like, if just one review compares us favorably to Creep, I'll consider that a win. And then it happened. Then it kept happening. And then like we have to use like pull quotes to compare us to Creep. So I am starting to reach a point where I'm resenting it a little bit because it's kind of like, guys, we have other things going on. We're not just a Creep rehash. Like Creep doesn't have all this Egyptian stuff in it. Like Anubis and the Duplass are very different. But I still think that's not Creep's fault.
Egyptian Creep.
Yeah. So I can't really hold it against it. And Hell House LLC obviously has the same distributor as us, but and I like it a lot. But I like all those movies pretty well. But I have to go Creep.
And Chad?
Yeah, I do like Hell House LLC a lot. I think it's a better found footage series that's out there, and it's actually scary. That's harder to pull off, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, Creep obviously is a big influence on what we did. I think the way it was originally made was supposed to be not horror, it's supposed to be a comedy. And then they ended up making it a horror movie because it wasn't working. And you can see that on the film when you watch it. And so I think for us, when we saw it, we're like, oh, you can like have a movie that kind of feels like an improv comedy, and then it can become a horror movie. And that to us, I think, was always a big inspiration and seemed like something there should be more of, So yeah, I mean, Creep's, I love Creep. It's great. And yeah, Creep 2 as well. I love.
Did you happen to watch the Shudder all 6 episodes of Creep?
Yeah, I love them.
That was we loved it.
Creepy?
It was. I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, it's just so disturbing, especially the last episode.
Yeah,
just very.
They did a good job.
Yeah, they did. Okay, I think this one may get them with different answers, Tim. I'm thinking, Rosemary's Baby or Hereditary.
Okay,
Sean, you go first.
Man, that's really tough because Rosemary's Baby this is the hardest one, I think, where I actually have to think about it. You might need to come back to me because I was thinking that Rosemary's Baby is such a classic, but it never scared me. There was never a time whereas Hereditary was, I alluded to this earlier, it was like that one really rattled me at a point in my life where I was like, I've seen it all, like nothing can upset me. So I might have to give it to Hereditary just because as a horror movie, it affected me more, but I don't know. It's maybe that sacrilege.
No. I mean, it's
There's no wrong answer.
You just desecrated a classic film, but I'm kidding. Hereditary is going to be a classic too. Okay, Chad, between the two,
I would say that I enjoy watching Rosemary's Baby more. Like, I guarantee when I die, I'll have seen Rosemary's Baby like a million times, and I'll have seen Hereditary like 5. but it was the same, like just like Sean said, I also kind of chase the dragon to actually get scared, and it happens very rarely. I'm very desensitized, and Hereditary like fucked me up. Like I was like rattled and shook for like a whole day, maybe even a couple days. Like it was like taking a drug. Like it affected my mind. And I still like when I tell people about it, I'm like, if they hadn't seen it, I'm like, oh man, like, it's the way people talked about The Exorcist in the 70s, Mm-hmm. So that aspect of it, I can't get past. So I would say Hereditary.
Got it. And John?
Yeah, we're batting 3 for 3 again. It's Hereditary on my end as well. I'll just tell the joke too. That was another one I'm pretty sure Sean and Chad had already seen, and then they just watched me watch that movie. And I remember before we started, I kind of had no idea what it was about or what would happen in it. And sort of offhand, I mentioned to them, it's like, what really disturbs me is decapitation. Anyways, and then
it's also one that I feel like is scarier before all the supernatural shit starts happening. Like even just the whole first half of that movie is so upsetting, even before anything supernatural happens.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. Okay, and then the final one and the most important decision, even though neither of these are found footage films or cult-related horror films, either the original Halloween from 1978 or the original Friday the 13th from 1980. And
just know you're Matt or Tim question.
Yeah. So let's have them answer before you, Sean. Okay, Chad, original Halloween or the original Friday the 13th?
I definitely have to go with Halloween. I'm more into spooky. I'm more into like the authentic, spooky, creepy, suburban Halloween vibes. I enjoy Friday the 13th. It's great. Like, but it's more fun, campy. Like that's if I'm hanging out, drinking with my friends, we want to throw a movie on. Like it's hard to beat. But just my own taste, is definitely to Halloween.
That's called good taste. Okay. Now, John.
Yeah, it's funny. I told you at the beginning of like how I was sort of adverse to horror. And so in many ways, Friday the 13th is the type of movie that made me love horror again. But that all said, where I stand today, I'm going to go Halloween. I know I'm disappointing Tim a lot with that response.
I'm just crying.
Wait, Sean, I forget if we asked you this in your first episode. We may not have, you and Denise, but what would you pick between the two?
Guys, you need to start asking Halloween or Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. I feel like that would be harder because you're just setting Tim up for heartbreak. I'm a Halloween guy.
Poor Tim.
Because I honestly think, like I've said, I think that as a franchise, I think Friday the 13th gets more interesting. Like, I mean, it goes to really interesting places. I mean, I guess Halloween does too with like, I love Season of the Witch and H2O. But I feel like Friday the 13th is the only series I can think of where it's like, oh yeah, Part 6 is where they nailed it. Or like Part 4, I feel like that's one where the sequels really shine for me. But Tim, you're a Part 1 guy.
I love them all. I mean, Jason X is a little rough. I can't do that one.
Yeah. And the original
Space is
Halloween.
One place you won't follow Jason.
No, okay. Space is. Oh, it's tough stuff.
And the original Halloween's my favorite movie of all time. Like it framed everything about like my love for horror, just everything. So I kind of credit that with all. Okay, so before we wrap up, we would just love to know what's next for each of you. So I guess starting with Sean, are there any new projects you're currently working on that you can tell us about?
So John, Chad, and I are working on something new, and this is something that's definitely happening because a lot of it's already in the can. It's not like one of these things that we talk about that's just vaporware and never comes out. Like this is something that will come out. I will say if it's anything like this movie, it might be years before you see what that is, but it is underway. And it is horror. But so we'll see what happens there.
Oh, you can't give us any hints, like subgenre type? Is it
people with blue faces?
Yeah, any cults?
I'd say it's very different than this one, subgenre wise. It's not a mummy movie.
Okay.
And Chad, what have you been up to since the film wrapped?
Or I guess, you all have the same answer to this question since you're working on the project together? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just like I don't have. My professional film world is basically dictated by when Sean needs me to do something. I have a winery. the main person that does everything at it. We have a tasting room in Southern Oregon, and that's a full-time job with 2 kids. So anything I do in the world of film at this moment anyways is because I can do it over a weekend with Sean.
No, that's amazing. And what is the name of your winery?
Iroquois, and we're near Mount Shasta, which is part of why Shasta plays a large role in the movie we made. So yeah, we're almost at the border of Oregon.
That's
You
amazing.
did for a lot of wine.
Yes, you did.
Exactly.
And I did notice when you signed on Zoom that your Zoom name is Iroquois Wine, and I was like, I don't know what that says. So now we do. And how about you, John? Or have you been working on the same project, or anything else you've been working on, or?
Yeah, great question. I'm sort of like Chad, right? That Sean is sort of our leader into film, and usually we're supporting him with projects. The one thing I'll say is almost 2 years ago now, my wife and I had twin daughters, and that first like 4 months was this like crazy fever dream of not sleeping and just like, I don't know, listening to the same music like day and night. And Sean and Chad know I've had this idea for a movie that would sort of play on kind of some themes we've talked about, but like essentially like really leverage that like weird moment for a new parent where like they are a new parent, they're not sleeping, there's so much stress, but then introduce a horror element to it too. So
The Shining?
we'll see if that's ever something to bring to if I ever actually like bring to any sort of actual production. But it's something I continue to tinker with in the background. So we'll see.
No, I don't have kids, but I can imagine how that's horrific in its own line.
You said they're twins?
Yes, and that's two at once. In case you didn't get it, all right. It's
Wow,
too many.
whoa.
It's too many at once.
That is a lot at once. I cannot imagine. So our final question, and I don't know if Sean, if you remember the final question that we ask every single person in every interview, and put them on the spot, and we're going to ask it of all 3 of you as related to this experience. What is one thing that each of you can tell us about your experience working on the ceremony is about to begin, and I don't know if you've already had interviews about this or what, but that you've never told any other publication, interviewer, podcaster, you haven't told your partners, just one thing about your experience working on this film that you've never told in any interview or anything related to this.
I'll kick it off. This is not advisable to do on a movie, but we did it because we were on a big ranch property and this was pre-rust. But this is just part of low budget filmmaking. Sam Raimi did it on the first Evil Dead. That shotgun is a real shotgun that Anubis is firing real shells. And honestly, it was funny though, because it was sort of this like, it's sometimes things are like too realistic, or it's like watching the playback. I was like, oh, when he fires the shotgun, there's no like muzzle flash, it's because it's a real shotgun. So it was funny, like even though he's firing real shells, I still had to like paint in a frame of like muzzle flare because that's just what we expect as a viewer. So that was just one, vaguely unsafe thing we did to bring this movie to you.
That's awesome. I wouldn't have expected that. So, Chad, had you had who's shooting the shotgun? Why am I blanking? Is that
Anubis is shooting?
Yeah. Had you had experience with a shotgun before?
Probably not enough, but yeah, a little bit. John had showed us how to shoot clay pigeons with shotguns in the past, but there's probably like a 10-year gap between the 2 times.
Got it. So when you said for a second, Sean, when you said pre-rust, it didn't connect to me, the Alec Baldwin thing. For some reason, I was thinking. I don't know what I was thinking.
I knew.
Okay. What you're thinking, but totally got it. That is a great fact. How about Chad, John, anything related to your experience that you've never told about it?
I'll say also not advisable, but in the 70s, I think it was the norm. When we've been doing these movies, the one we just finished and then this one, we basically need to cram in the majority of our scenes over a short period of time. And it's usually like our chance to get away from our families and hang out. So we basically have kind of like an upbeat bender for a few days while we're filming and like making these movies. So it's kind of like being at a bachelor party where you're filming a movie. So I would say, one aspect of that is like we have this tradition where we all like split a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon in one day. And so that was happening while we're like improvising the whole movie. So yeah, it worked out well, but it was kind of crazy.
That's hilarious. I love it.
That bottle of bourbon makes a cameo in the hot tub scene.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Things are getting
Chug straight from it.
no problem. How about you, John? Anything related to your experience that you have not told?
Yeah, Chad kind of stole mine. I was going to say that I was definitely like pretty drunk for a couple of the scenes, but okay. That said, now that he already kind of did that one, I think that then to just Chad talked at length about sort of some of his inspirations, but there's one other sort of precursor, almost Anubis 1.0 that came before Anubis. And it was, Chad was talking about how we're kind of doing this improv thing sort of all the time when we're together, and we're at somebody's birthday, and Chad tried to make up kind of the most obnoxious like persona to be like plaguing this party. And it was this guy named Carmichael that was just, again, this like kind of health nut and everything. So my tip is like, despite everything you've heard, like Carmichael is truly like the original mold for the Anubis character. And that was just something, again, Chad created sort of on a whim to annoy people.
And to be the full extent of that is that Carmichael is mainly an Instagram handle. So you mainly experience him through his Instagram posts, they're very prescient. He was very obsessed with Elon Musk back in like 2018 or something.
That's hilarious. You know what I love about the three of you is you can like feel the friendship that you guys have had, that you guys have known each other for so long, that you have like, it reminds me of like, we all have friends that we've known like our whole life, and just the vibe that you have with them. But what's really cool about it is that you guys can get to make movies together, and it seems like you guys have so much fun working together. So like, that's just awesome, because that's what it should be about,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Seriously, all three of you. We hope that this was easy for you. This was a little bit of a challenge for us because we've never interviewed three people together, but we hope we made it worthwhile for all three of you. And seriously, best of luck on everything from this movie to your next project. We hope we see it soon and can have you guys back on the show.
More than happy to be uncredited mummies.
Yes, Sean. If you ever need more uncredited
mummies, to you
mummies,
guys. Like I needed mummies that day, and I didn't think to hit you guys up.
Oh my God, we would have gone up to Northern California. Yeah. Are you kidding? Or no, wait, well, that was in LA.
That was LA. Yeah,
wait, that was in LA. We're in LA now. I'm insulted.
I know. Next time.
Oh my God,
honestly. You joke, but I think we'll probably be back with another movie if you'll have us.
Oh my God, of course, yeah. And again, like, yeah, it's so much fun, and I love that you're continuing to do it. That you're sticking with horror. That's great. You know?
Don't do those hard-hitting dramas.
I tried it, and it was not for me. So I'm staying in my lane.
No, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys. We'll definitely be in touch, and wish you all the best with the release of this.
Thank you. Thanks for having us,
guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Happy Horror Time.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/happyhorrortime. As a patron, you get access to all our bonus content, which now includes 2 new bonus episodes every month, a monthly after show mini episode, access to our Discord community so you can chat with us directly, and the chance to review a film with us in one of our bonus episodes.
Patrons also get all our regular episodes ad-free and a day early, our monthly newsletter, the chance to vote in polls, and autographed Happy Horror Time stickers.
I'm Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch.
And we hope you have a happy horror time.